Hello, Adam Savage in my cave, answering some questions from tested patrons about my tenure at ILM. And Shadowfax 1007 has a great question. Shadowfax 1007 wants to know, wait a minute, what would you say is the best skill you took away from your time at ILM? It's going to be mold making. Not that I didn't know how mold making worked before I worked at ILM, but my exposure to mold making pre-ILM was only the work of one guy, Mitch Romanowski, who taught me a tremendous amount about mold making, how to think through it, how to imagine it, what the philosophy was. And mold making is a really, really difficult discipline because it's all about thinking upside down and backwards and also inside out, kind of the way sewing does too. They have some similarities. But it wasn't until I got to Industrial Light and Magic and met the folks in the mold room, Mike Job and Tony Preciado and the others, Mark Firenza, that, sorry, a machine I've got running over on the other side of the shop sounded like it stopped running. It wasn't until I saw the craftspeople in the mold room at ILM that I really grokked what a magnificent, intricate, complicated, consterning, amazing art form mold making can truly be. And to demonstrate this, I want to show you a mold that I built that I think is the best mold I have ever personally built. I was doing a job. So this is, this is like 2001. Galoob Toys hired me to make some prototype models for a mid-range set of Star Wars ships. Here is a rough casting of the Star Destroyer that I produced for them. I didn't actually build this. Dave Fogler, who was the effects supervisor on the last Transformers film, good friend of mine, he did all the model making on this. This isn't a great casting. It's got some separation here and there, but like it took us a few to get this right. But to make this piece it was almost monolithic. This was an add-on. And also, yeah, let's show you some real close-ups of this thing. You can see, yeah, I'll shoot some better close-ups as B-roll. This Star Destroyer was one of the ships that we produced for Galoob. And they wanted, I think, 2 or 3 of each ship. One they had to send to LFL marketing, another they sent to their factory, etc. And I had to figure out how to mold this. And so I specifically remember having a conversation with Mike Job and Tony Preciado and getting advice from them about how to do it. And recently in storage, in my storage space, I found the original mold. Oh, no. I'm totally wrong. I didn't find this in storage. John Duncan brought this by because I'd lent this to him like 12 or 15 years ago. I found another one of my models. I found my TIE Bomber mold in storage recently. This is the mold that I made for this ship, and it's worth showing you because what I needed was a mold that allowed me to remove this delicate shape from its confines, right? So the normal, easy, cheap, fast, or not necessarily cheap, but the fast and dirty way to do a mold is to put a pouring gate somewhere and then pour a brick of rubber around this. And then when you pull it out, you pour rubber in the pouring hole and it fills up the brick, and that's got dimensional stability and everything. But for a model like this, that causes a lot of issues. You're gonna have to cut that block of silicone, and you're not gonna want irregularities along this leading edge from that cut. Yes, you could do a jeweler's cut that would eliminate much of it, but you don't want the hassle. So I wanted a 2-piece mold that held this in orientation. But then I didn't want the rubber to be too thick because I wanted to be able to peel the rubber off the resin casting. I wasn't going to cast these solid. I actually cast them somewhat hollow. And again, like I said, these are delicate, so I need that rubber to be thin. So this is the mold that solved all those problems. The outer jacket, the mother mold, is a ceramic hard plaster whose name is escaping me at this very second, but it's a UltraCal. It's a super hard plaster. It actually, if you had a thin chunk of it, almost sounds like glass when it breaks. It's so hard. And it's got some, if you look here closely, you can see a little bit of fibrous material. That's jute. And jute, which is like a hemp-based sort of fibrous material, is what the mold room used for supporting UltraCal mother molds. So again, all of this came from the wonderful tutelage of the mold makers at ILM. Okay, so in order, before I show you this, I just want to like walk you through the mechanics of thinking through this. So if what I want is what's called a blanket mold that is in two pieces that surrounds my ship, that's fairly easy to understand. A blanket mold is a thin layer of silicone, about 1/8 of an inch thick, maybe 1/4 of an inch, that is the overall shape of the ship, nice and thin so I can pull it off the resin. But it also needs to actually have keys that hold that blanket mold in the mother mold. So how do you do that? Well, you end up actually doing a lot of work with clay and plaster, and then you remove the clay and then you pour silicone into the interstices where there was plaster. And yeah, I can't get more detailed than that because I'm going to need drawings and supporting materials. But this is the mold that I made. And 20 years later, it's still beautiful. It probably will survive one more casting, which is why I actually have it sitting on my mold table right now, because I do plan to do one last casting with it before retiring it. Old silicone gets brittle. You have to be very careful with how you handle it. But if you look really close, you can see that what I did was I actually sculpted a clay blanket around the ship that the ship registered inside of. And then I keyed the outside of that blanket to the plaster mold. And then in addition, I have these keys here that register it into the outside of the mother mold. And in order to achieve real good adhesion there, I would precede every casting by putting a little Vaseline on the inside of the mold to provide a little liquid suction to keep this very thin mold perfectly registered to the inside of the plaster mother mold. This is not a mold I would have been able to even conceive of had I not been able to watch the incredible craftsmanship on display in ILM's mold shop. Yeah, I learned so much from those guys, and they were open books about my questioning. It was a real delight. Thank you guys for joining me on this trip down memory lane. Yeah, I will do a casting of this. I will show you the final thing. Because I don't have any of the castings of the ships that I built for Galoob. I have all the molds now, and it's time to put them all back together. All right, thank you guys for those great questions. Tested patrons, please keep submitting your wonderful questions, and I will continue to answer them. Thank you guys so much. I will see you next time.